Have you ever been in the woods and felt like something was watching you? Not a person, not an animal, something else. Most people shake it off, blame it on paranoia, the wind, or a trick of the light. But what if that feeling wasn't just in your head? What if the forest was watching you back? We like to think we know the woods, that maps and trails make them safe. But tell that to the hikers who vanish without a trace, whose last known locations are places that shouldn't exist. I spent years patrolling these forests, memorizing every trail, every landmark. But lately, things don't feel right. Paths appear where they shouldn't. Trees seem to shift when I'm not looking. And the worst part? I've started seeing things in my reports, things I never wrote down. Someone, or something, has been watching me, leaving me warnings. And if I don't figure out why, I might be next. Before we begin, have you ever been deep in the woods and felt like the silence was too deep? Like the path ahead looked just a little too unfamiliar? If you've ever had that feeling, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because after this story, you might think twice before stepping into the woods alone. I've worked as a national park ranger for nearly a decade. In that time, I've seen my fair share of bizarre things. Missing hikers who turn up miles from where they should be. Perfectly healthy people who suddenly become disoriented. In cases where we find a tent, belongings, even food still warm in the pot, but no person in sight. We always had theories. Wild animals, sudden sickness, human foul play. But there was one case I never talked about, because it didn't fit any explanation. It started with the missing route. I was stationed at Yellowwood State Forest, Indiana, a smaller, lesser-known area compared to the massive national parks, but still covering miles of thick forest. Hikers rarely got lost here. There were only a few well-marked trails, but in late September, 3 disappearances happened back-to-back. Case 1, a solo hiker, reported missing after she never returned. Case 2, a father and son, found wandering miles away, confused and disoriented. They insisted they had never left the trail, yet somehow ended up in a part of the forest that required hiking over a river, something neither of them remembered doing. And Case 3, a group of 3 friends, who swore they saw a second path splitting off from the trail. When they turned around, it was gone. That last report caught my attention. There were no unofficial trails in that area. At least, there shouldn't have been. I hiked out alone the next morning. I was familiar with the area, but something felt wrong that day. The usual sounds, birds, rustling leaves, felt dampened, like the forest was holding its breath. And then, I saw it. A narrow trail, barely wide enough for one person. It wasn't on the map. It wasn't part of any known route. But the dirt was packed down, like it had been walked recently. I pulled out my GPS and marked the location. But the moment I looked back up, the trail was gone. Not overgrown, not hidden by shadows, just gone. I turned in a slow circle, heart pounding. Had I imagined it? No, I had marked it. I looked down at my GPS. The coordinates were scrambled. If this happened to you, would you report it or try to solve it yourself? Let me know in the comments. The next day, I took another ranger with me. Let's call him Doug. He was skeptical, but he trusted me enough to check it out. We reached the spot, and sure enough, the path was there again. Doug frowned. That wasn't there last month. I stepped closer, examining the ground. The dirt was smooth, like someone or something had swept away any footprints. That's when we heard the whistling. Far off, barely audible, a tune I didn't recognize, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. Doug called out, "Hello?
This is Park Services."
Silence. Then, a voice, low, mimicking his exact tone and words. "Hello? This is Park Services." Doug's face went pale. "Let's go," I muttered. We turned back toward the main trail, but it was gone. The only reason we found our way back? Doug had dropped an energy bar wrapper earlier. I spotted it caught on a branch and we followed our own footprints back. After that, we didn't talk about it. Not to the other rangers, not to anyone. But a week later, something happened that forced my hand. A man showed up at the ranger station. He was filthy, covered in scratches. His hands were raw, his lips cracked. He looked like he had been lost for days. I asked if he needed medical help. He shook his head. Then he grabbed my arm, hard, and whispered, "Don't let it see you leave." I asked what he meant. He just shook his head again, eyes wide, and muttered something under his breath. I leaned closer. He was whispering coordinates. to the missing route. I went back one last time, alone. This time, I left markers, bright orange ribbons on trees. No way I could get turned around. I walked the path. I heard no birds, no wind, no life. Then, up ahead, I saw a figure. A man, standing perfectly still in the middle of the path. He wore a ranger uniform, the same one I was wearing. And as I stepped closer, he lifted his hand and waved. At that moment, my GPS died. The sky darkened, though sunset was hours away. My breath felt too loud. Then, the man turned and walked deeper into the woods. And I followed. I don't know why, I just had to. I took one step, and then, my radio crackled to life. Doug's voice, screaming my name, like snapping out of a trance. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. I looked back. The trail was gone. I never found the man who gave me those coordinates. I filed a report about the missing hiker, but there was nothing concrete to go on. No real evidence, just my own unease and the scrambled GPS logs. Doug and I agreed not to talk about what we saw, but the disappearances continued. 2 weeks later, another hiker was reported missing in the same area. This time, the search teams found his backpack neatly placed on the side of the trail, like he had just set it down and walked away. His phone was still inside, battery dead. But the weirdest part, his GPS logs showed something impossible. They indicated he had walked straight through a dense section of the forest, an area with no recorded trails. No way through unless you were cutting through miles of untouched wilderness. Like he had followed a path that didn't exist. I still work in the park, but I don't go near that area anymore. I've seen too many cases where people go in and don't come back. A few weeks ago, a new trainee asked me about the missing hiker reports. He was eager, fresh out of training, and wanted to know if there were any areas he should avoid. I told him, stick to the official trails. Don't go looking for shortcuts. He laughed. Yeah, but seriously, there aren't any real dangers out here, right? I didn't answer. Because the truth is, I don't know what's out there. I just know that when the trees seem too still, when the forest feels too quiet, when you see a trail that shouldn't be there, you don't follow it. You turn around, and you leave. What do you think really happened? Leave your theories below. I'll pin the most chilling one.